Hello, Carol Taylor-Kearney here with Heather Diacont Rinehart, and we are standing in front of her beautiful painting, and Heather is going to tell us a little bit about it.
Hello. So the painting is called Power Strip, and it is centered around this female figure, and there's a lot going on in here. There is some wordplay. We've got some organic shapes. It's really centered around an idea of playing with the words, power strip. So there's power flowing through the woman. She's a powerful figure herself. But being female, we know that power is stripped from individuals in different ways. So part of what I'm thinking about with this piece is this idea of epigenetics and how generationally power can be stripped from female identifying individuals through changes that actually happen in the DNA due to traumas that are suffered or negative experiences. How are we passing that down? And what are we passing on to society itself?
No, and that's both a very important message today, and it really shows itself in here because what I see is throughout this figure, there is this rushing ball of energy as well as a power strip that runs up her back. And she seems to almost be both lighting and through her form making these different places. So we'll start with this. Is this based on a real person?
Well, yeah, and in some ways, yes. So the initial drawing came about working from a model. And she was a very lovely model to draw from, very powerful in her persona and her poses. But then bringing back many sketches into the studio, this painting kind of evolved from that. And it became much more about female experience than any individual. Female experience, as a group of female folks, but also how that impacts the way everybody experiences the world.
Well, I like how you also tied it into art history because we always, think of the Guerrilla Girls and what was their big call? Why are all the women who are in the Met Museum on paintings and not actually the artists? And what we have here is a female figure as a muse, and yet it seems to be generating all the energy, not only within her, but within the space.
Well, and also it seems like she is central and all of these things are happening in the universe of the painting is surrounding her. And it's all of these things, including like you can see like DNA and things like that in there. And earlier we were talking about how there's stairways and doorways and little women coming through. And you've written phrases about power and the way we conceptualize that with women. And so we think a lot art historically about the woman being the central figure, but in this, she's the central figure, but she is within this universe. She's not sitting as an object. She is interacting. She is the universe of this piece.
That's definitely something that I try to convey in my art across the board, I think. We tend to kind of categorize human experience as, oh, this is nature, I go to the park or whatever, and then, all this, the town, the house that you're in is not nature, but it is.
Yeah.
It is all nature.
It is your nature.
Yep, it's nebulous and it's all connected. And so that's, you have this, it's all organic kind of colors. There's nothing like super punchy, I think, as far as color goes. But you also have organic shapes and things that we think of as being inorganic, like buildings and structures and things like that.
Well, as a composition too, it all sits in the same. It's not a flattened composition. It's not a deep space composition, but what it is it's almost like a diagram.
It's a diagram, but also it feels almost like all of these things are moving within the realm that she's in. And so it feels to me less like, it feels like she's in a room, and yet there's these things that constantly surround her that are not physical objects, but do impact her being, that are surrounding her, and she's moving through the space the way that you've moved her head, like has multiple, you've used multiple perspectives and things like that. And so it really feels like she's being surrounded by all of these factors that impact her on an organic level.
And whether that is for the good or not, it's up in the air.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that we don't talk enough about. Like earlier, we were talking about marginalized groups. We don't talk about how historical trauma and how adaptive changes that we all make within our beings affect what we're going to pass down, both in behavior, but also genetically.
Yeah.
So,
right down to our blueprints.
Yeah. So it's in the code.
That's right. We don't know.
So.
And you get different senses of that. So I was going to ask you a little bit about the perspectives within this, because we have back here a small outline of a figure. Here we see a face coming in. We have the body that's in perfect perspective with, it's like her face is turning to us and away from us. Yeah. Is this a goat?
It is.
Okay, that's what I thought too. And then there's a little goat's eye over to the right, so this has to be seen in person. Most art is always better in person, but this has to be like, it's so nuanced and there's so much to explore and read.
Thank you.
So, it is a goat. Can you explain the goat?
No. I mean, there's a lot of animals creep into my work, and usually it's not a goat for me, but this time it was, and I can't exactly put my finger on that, except that goats definitely represent kind of a farming aspect, a domestic aspect, and that's a very female kind of feeling, and it just kind of happened there.
I love it.
Sprang up.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the phrases you've written?
Sure. So there was kind of a repeating mantra just internally as I was working on this, and that's the bulk of what you see is just, it's the repeating phrases of different ways that women are stripped. Strip her of her power, strip her of her mind, strip her every hour, strip her of her time. And that's, repeating in different scripts, in different directions. It's throughout. If you were able to peel the layers of paint off of this, you would have multiple words underneath that you can't even see anymore.
I also love this idea of wordplay where we talk about women stripping in this thing that's very, like, stripping is an action we all do every day, and yet it's become an objectification term for objectification of women. And so this idea that women don't just strip themselves of their clothes. We have stripped many things historically that have, made the system is a little bit more difficult for anyone who's marginalized, because we've stripped them of these things that have nothing to do with our clothing as objects.
You strip them of their personality to make them into a type.
Yeah.
And on one hand, as you said, this was a specific person who has become, within the universe of your painting, a model, not just a figurative model that you use, but a model that women can all identify with and say, yes, I understand what she's saying here. I also love that periodically throughout this, there are eyes. So the figure's not looking at me, but the painting looks at me a lot.
That's lovely. Thank you. I'm glad that you like that. Yeah, it does. It's peering out. What you gonna do about it?
So, I love this piece. I love the nuance, the play on words. I love that you're delving into a fascinating conversation that we probably should be having more, and you're doing it in a beautifully elegant way.
Thank you.
So,
Kind of sounds like Heather herself.
Yeah.
So please come and see Heather Diacont Rinehart. Thank you. I'm just so full of myself. Heather Diacont Rinehart's beautiful painting at Powell Arts through November 20th.